Welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod, where every week we dive into a different practice, a different perspective on life, and you try it out with us. Join us on Substack at mindbodpod.com to watch this episode as a video podcast. And if you want to support our crazy adventures and get fun perks and exclusives along the way, join us as a paid subscriber. Now, onto this week's adventure. Welcome back to the MindBod Adventure Pod. I'm your co-host, Tasha.
And I'm your co-host, Jeff Warren, and with us is...
Chelene Knight, one of my favorite writers and also my personal writing mentor. Whenever I get a chance to work with a mentor, she's the number one, my favorite person ever. Well, sorry, Jeff's my favorite person. Chelene's my second favorite person. And Blaze, my partner, is in there somewhere too. A extremely talented writer, award-winning writer in poetry, fiction, memoir, and her most recent book, Safekeeping, is a nonfiction book. It's like a journal for writers, right? Like a kind of guided journal, a trip through writing books that you love. Right? Tell us a bit about it.
Safekeeping, listen, this is a book that I think, dare I say, contains all of my mistakes as a writer. And all the things that I've learned just from not only just writing, but being around other writers and listening to the things that they struggle with. And so putting together a book or a tool that could help them go deeper into who they are was something I always wanted to do, but didn't really know how to do. So I'm like, well, let's just look at all the mistakes that I made and see how I can't create something spicy from that. So that's essentially what safekeeping is. It's like, here's how you can build out your whole creative life or your whole creative world in a way that feels good in your body and in a way that feels good for you. And it's a work in progress. I think there's other books to follow that kind of carry that thread. So who knows? I'm never going to stop writing books.
I'm dying to ask right off the bat, what's the biggest mistake you made?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I think the biggest mistake I made was not valuing what I wanted for myself or what I thought writing was. Because I always had an idea of what writing was, but then I'm out in this world and I hear something different, that to be a writer, you must follow a very specific path and you better not veer off of it. And so I was on that road thinking, this doesn't feel good at all, but I'm going to stay here. I'm going to keep doing this. And it took me years to figure out that I actually had a lot of control over my process, over where I showed up. Like that was a big one. Like, let me show up in the spaces where I feel like I can be myself versus putting on this kind of stuffy, I don't even know what to call it, like academic.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. Literati.
Something. Yeah. So I think the biggest mistake was just not being me.
That was one of my biggest takeaways when we first started working together, because for me, coming from the music world, same thing. There's a very clear way to show up and there's a very clear path to success. And I came to you kind of when I was like, I want to take more reins of my literature world and I don't want to make the same mistakes I made in music. And you're like, you're talking to the pro in that. Let's go a completely different way, carve your own path. It was so liberating, like to start my writing journey in that mind frame of like, you can build this how you want to. Feels a lot better.
I've gone through a very similar process, and it's amazing what kinds of things you take on around what you're supposed to be like. Like, I have for a long time, I thought I had to write a certain kind of book. And when I really finally got to the place where I was able to examine it, it was because of some sense of security, thinking I needed to speak to this group when it wasn't actually who I wanted to speak to. It wasn't what I was all about. It was just more some part of a mask or part of a sense of my own insecurity, you know?
And just before we hit record, we were talking about reading as a practice as well.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that factors in as a writer and as a creative?
It's funny because a few weeks ago, I had a beautiful conversation with writer Antonio Michael Downing. We did CBC, The Next Chapter. And he said something to me that really just kind of stuck in my brain. And I told him I was a big rereader. I'm like, listen, I'm going to reread a book like 3 to 4 times. I'm going to be like immersed in this book. And he said, there is no reading. There's only rereading. And I was like, ooh, something about that really stuck with me. And I think it's because of this this notion that we think we have to go into a book and read it and just absorb everything. We have to understand it. We have to hold it all. We have to be able to take from that book and then plug it into our lives. But I believe when we go into a book, we are in a very specific mindset. We're in a very particular time in our lives. We are only meant to pick up and absorb certain things. Then we got to put it away. And then we got to go outside. We got to live life. We got to sniff the flowers. We've got to do hard things. We have to let go. We have to just be in the world living and then come back and then pick up that same book. But now we're going to be asking some very different questions about what we want to take away from it. Like I shared with you, good people, that I was rereading this behemoth, this massive book, The Book of Negroes by Lawrence Hill. And this is the illustrated edition. So there's like all kinds of things from the archives kind of sprinkled throughout. So my mind just goes on a tangent when I'm reading this. But what's interesting to me is how immersed I am in this book, how I'm feeling it in a very different way. And, you know, writing about difficult things like slavery and any kind of traumatic time period or, you know, just anything difficult, you're going to feel like you can't not feel. But what's different is I'm feeling this book in a way where I feel like I'm there. And that is terrifying. But also it's like, well, what was I doing 10 years ago when I first read this? And why did I not feel that close to the book? Why was I not immersed? Why was I not questioning? Why was I not paying attention to proximity? Like, I feel like my five senses are alive. What happened to me that allowed for me to hold the book in this way? Like, those are the kinds of questions that get me really excited because I don't know what happened.
That's really interesting because as you're saying that, I'm thinking about some of my rereading experiences. And especially there's like books that I've been rereading since I was like in high school. Because in high school, I read a lot of Kurt Vonnegut and Jack Kerouac. Those were like formative for me. And some like Bukowski and like those kind of dudes, right?
Yes.
And that writing sang to me. It was like a beacon of just cool, and I just loved their voice. And I realize every time I read another one, Kerouac stays with me, Vonnegut stays with me, but some of the other ones just fall off. And I realize it's because when I was in high school, I gravitated towards masculine voices. I was like everything girly. I was like, ew, like feminine, ew. So I just loved this independent kind of like worldly, like can't be attached to anything. I'm very cerebral kind of male writers. And as I've grown and gotten more in touch, I've just become more of like a whole person and not so like, you know, internally misogynistic anymore. Just like rereading that and kind of wishing that there was more balance in some of those pieces that really informed me when I was younger. So at that and like reading things that I underlined that I'm like, why did you underline that? That's not that deep.
Yes. That's why we should be marking up our books. Like, why are we so afraid? Like, I'll go back and look in the margins and think, what in the world does that mean? But also what we highlight, I think, is incredibly valuable data, right? So again, it's this idea of rereading for my own personal evolution, my own personal growth, but also rereading to look for things and ideas and messages that I can then push into the writerly realm as well, which is not something I plan to do when I do my rereading practice, but it happens so organically and naturally that it just feels almost energizing, which is strange, I suppose.
Well, it's interesting. I was thinking about like in the process of reading, there's a kind of, sometimes there's a kind of tension between totally surrendering to the narrative or the story to the point where you want to lose yourself in it, that I'm not even there to take notes, you know?
Yeah.
Versus like being in relationship with it more consciously. I tend to be more like that with nonfiction books and more in the disappear with fiction books, of course, but not always. And like sometimes the fiction, it takes me so much out of the thing that I have to write it down or I have to dialogue with it. But for nonfiction, I feel like I can't really know the book until I'm in a process of figuring what I think about it and writing about it. And those are those two modes that you recognize? Are there other modes that, how do we read?
Yes. How do we read? I really like that as a question. I think for me, it definitely depends on genre. I know for fiction, I'm looking to escape. Like I want to be immersed, but I also like I want to learn. I want to learn about something that maybe I've avoided in life. So how can fiction be a container for that? And with nonfiction, I find that I go in with a lot of expectations. Like this needs to teach me this, 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 and this. And it's almost like I have a checklist in my head that I'm trying to check off. So I find that I'm more in conversation with myself with nonfiction, and it doesn't matter if it's memoir, if it's narrative nonfiction, if it's like a cutesy thing, it doesn't even matter. It's an opportunity, really, when I zoom the lens out, is just to slow down. That's all it is for me, because I think in the world that we are in now, it feels like, listen, you better hurry up. You better get this. You better absorb this. You better have an answer for this. You better have a solution for this. You better just do it and do it quickly. So for me, anytime I open a book, sure, I kind of have my processes and my ways of existing inside of a book. But what I think is incredibly powerful is I've just decided for myself, I am going to turn the volume knob down on everything else. And I'm going to be in this space for however long I want to be here. And that intentional decision is just like, I don't know, it's mind boggling because I work with a lot of writers who say, oh, I don't have time. Like, I can't make space for this. But if you make space to send me the email to tell me that you didn't have time and space, it's like, well, you just did, but you made that decision and you slowed down long enough to send me that email. And then a book is the same thing. It's just
Absolutely.
you get to do something a little bit more beautiful than sending me an email.
God, what you're talking about is almost exactly a kind of meditation
Yes.
practice.
Yes.
And you're talking about the same process people use to convince themselves that they can't meditate.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They don't have time. Because it's like, it really is the practice of learning how to not listen to your mind with its urgencies and certainties and all the things that it wants to pave everything over with.
I think also it's like, you know that a book is an intimate experience, right? Like we're just talking about, either you're interacting with it on a conceptual level and you're kind of having a conversation of ideas with the author in your own mind and body, or you're opening yourself up to like beautiful literary descriptions of sometimes very difficult emotions and stuff that you'd rather not look at. And I feel like when people are, you know, your nervous system's already keyed up, you feel like all this time pressure and life pressure, it is actually really a practice to be like, I'm going to open myself up to this level of vulnerability is really what it is.
And without an agenda.
Yeah, without an agenda. I'm not going to make,
'Cause
I
otherwise you
might
can't-
feel something and have there's no reason for it. It's just the act of being human with some pages. And it's,
Yes. And it's so simple, right? It's like the act of being human with some pages. It's so simple. I spoke with a friend a while ago and she's like, oh yeah, but if I open this book, then like I have to finish it. Who said that? Who said that? And then she started talking about like snacking on books where it's like the pressure to finish it is out the window because it's just a snack. So a snack could be a page, which is why I love poetry, because again, I can read one poem that's like a half a page and feel like I just, you know, I'm nourished, I'm full because I had this beautiful snack. So this idea of completion, I try to throw that out. And also if I don't like a book or it's doing something to me where my body's starting to feel different, I can put it away. Like no one's going to knock at my door and say, did you finish that book? And what did you think about it? Please tell us.
Yeah. Have you always been this attentive a reader?
Oh,
You
yes.
have to learn to become a better reader?
You know what's funny, Jeff, is it's funny because when I built my studio, I built it on the assumption that this kind of stuff was easy. I'm like, I can pick up a book and just find all kinds of amazingness and I can go inward and I understand what I'm trying to find out about myself. Not everyone can do that. Oh, that was really eye-opening for me. So I made this big assumption that, you know, this was an easy task to pick up a book and to be able to see all of these different things, but then also to be able to reflect after you read and think, well, how do I feel about this? What questions do I have about the world around me? Like I thought this is just what people do when they read, right? No. And so in working with writers, I found that out the hard way, where I'm giving them, you know, all of this material and all of these things to do. And they're like, Chelene, like, we don't know what to do with this. Like, what do you mean write a reflection after it. What do you mean, write in the margins or go into these lines? Like, what does that mean? And so I had to take a step back and actually ask myself, well, what is it that I want to offer? Not just these writers, but what do I want to offer my community in terms of how I show up and my skill set? And I saw the power of reading in this way, but also writing in this way, and then reflection and how they all connected through this overarching desire to just slow down and look at all of it and see the connecting pieces. So I had to go back into my own process and into my studio and rebuild it from the ground up. So it's less about here's how you write or here's how you create. It's more about here's how you look at who you are and find value even in all the pieces that you don't yet understand or all the pieces that you used to see as broken. How do we take those pieces and do something incredible with them? So there's the no waste reading, but also maybe no waste writing as well. So I think they kind of go hand in hand.
It's exciting to meet someone who's figured out their own practice and how to communicate it to others. You have some practices that I guess around reading and listening that you're going to take us through. Is this a good time to explore one?
Yes, this is a great time. So let's do one of them. And for me, I'll just kind of preface this by saying poetry for me is the foundation for all writing and maybe for all reading, because I believe that if you can master some element of language play, then you can write anything. That is my belief. Feel free to debate me and send me emails and argue with me. That's okay too. Because poetry is amazing because it is not only the words on the page, but it's how you hear them. And you don't have to understand it. You don't have to decipher. You don't have to take the whole thing away and say, here's what this poem is about. All you have to do is pay attention to a piece that resonates or something that sticks with you. And then later you get to investigate, well, why? What was it about that? So there's this meditative vibe about just listening to poetry. Anytime I listen to poetry, I have to close my eyes because I want to see what makes me open them. And so I pay so much attention to like, ooh, there was almost like a movement in that word and it caused me to like open my eyes. So when I'm listening to other people read poetry, like that's just like delicious. But if I have to read my own poetry, it's like, that's a whole different thing we won't get into. But I'll be reading other writers' poetry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with one poem. I'm going to read it out and you can absorb it in whatever way feels good for you. But I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the rhythms, the sounds, the places maybe where my voice shifts, maybe what words I might stumble over, because that's okay too, and that's part of it. And then I'll invite you both to repeat a single word or phrase from the poem that stood out to you. And that's it. And then I'm going to read it again, and you're just going to listen and see if there's an echo that happens based on you both sharing that word or phrase. Do you listen to the poem differently? So I'm going to be reading a poem called Dear Ghosts, I Pick the List by Julia Buzma. Dear ghosts, I pick the list. For names like herringbones from the fish's oiled cavity, I run them between my teeth, stroke the scarred light of photographs. Your granulated faces, mimeographed eyes always left in the dark. I take up scissors, razor blades, the rusted garden loppers, pinking shears. I scissor you. To islands rearrange until my fingerprints peel your faces gray. I bind you to my walls. I let you hang. You watch me sleep, your silence a blood burst in my mouth. I dream of ink, wake as a stain against my sheets. Finally, I shred the maps, scatter the portraits, watch your faceless flutter down. 100-year-old snow dusts the ground. This is our only blessing. Bury you in the yard. Sing as I fingernail our forgetting into bone clay. And so take a second, take a couple of seconds. If there's a word or phrase that stood out to you, I'd love to know what it was.
That poem gave me goosies. It was so,
I wish I wrote it.
yeah.
Extremely visceral. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
That's
Very
exactly the
graphic.
right word, because it was exactly what we were talking about just a second ago. That symbolic territory that just bypasses your logical mind and goes right for the body.
Mm-hmm.
The words I kind of latched onto were all the like sharp things. There was the scissors and razors, fingernails, like anything that felt like that. It was what gave me goosebumps.
Love that. What about you, Jeff?
Oh, basically I fell into the cavity. As soon as you said cavity, I dropped into cavity and I feel like I stayed there. And I heard the other things, but I was in this, that set me up at that. I couldn't get out of the cavity. Not that I wanted to. I was,
That's
it
so
was,
cool. I don't even remember hearing the word cavity.
yeah, it was like something about a fish bone and then boom,
yeah.
dropped into cavity. And I was like
Yes.
in there. And I had that feeling the whole way rest of the poem. And then the one that echoed it was the blood bursting somehow.
Very interesting. So, Tasha, you're all about the sharp things. Jeff is in the cavity. And for me, it's I fingernail our forgetting. And I'm like, what does that mean or look like? So for me, it's like the curiosity. I'm going to follow that phrase later. I fingernail our forgetting. And if I'm later washing dishes or just doing some mundane tasks and that phrase pops up, I'll know I need to do something with that later. I don't know what it's going to be. But whenever a phrase or a word kind of just repopulates in the brain, I think there's a reason for that.
You mean you want to do something later, meaning you might talk about it, you might write with an inspiration of that in mind, you might pursue it as a reflection that opened up another insight, all the above, like
Exactly. All the above. I might write about it. I might text that poem to a friend and say, listen, you need to read this. Tell me what comes up for you. But I'm going to take that and I'm going to push it out in some way. And I like the idea of not knowing what that might be or what that might feel like.
I love that. It's like an invitation to just like luxuriate in
I like that
a
word.
piece. Because like, I read a lot of poetry and I return to my like 20 favorite poetry books and I've returned to them for decades. But I'll read the poem, feel it, and then I put it down. And what you're inviting is like let it live in your skin like for the day, like just like carry it with you, kind of luxuriate in it. I love that.
And that's writing, right? When you're thinking about these things and you don't know what's going to come of it, but you're allowing yourself the time to slow down, to hold it, to keep it there, to maybe do something with it later. Like that is the act of writing. That's what I call unstructured play, where it's just this opportunity to not get words down, but to think, well, what can I do with what's in my head? What can I do with what I'm doing right now? And how can that be a creative act? So writing is more than drafting, that's for sure.
oh yeah. I mean, it's like, what can I do with it while holding it with what and while not knowing? Because
Yeah.
you have to have the not knowing. It's like, what can I do with it? And I have an agenda already around it versus like the difference between that and like, I have this, I don't even know fully what it means. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I'm okay with that. Then it can flower in a way. I mean, I'm talking about my own experience, maybe.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm too prescriptive about it or something.
It's like I work with music like this, and I know a lot of musicians who do. Like, I have my guitar laying there, I'll like play a riff or something, no idea what's going to come of it, but it's like in your head while you're going for a walk. It's like you're watching a television show and it's playing in there, and then suddenly the pieces of the song kind of come together
Oh, I like
from
that.
nowhere.
It's like just paying attention to whatever's around you and being able to connect it back to that piece that maybe you tucked away. That happens to me all the time. And it's like goosebumpy vibes where I'm like just watching something on Netflix and I'm like, that got me thinking about that thing or that phrase or that word. I need to just go write it down on a pad of paper and then I'll come back. Right. But it's the permission to do that. It's like it takes you a couple of seconds, still slowing down.
Yeah, and what you're talking about too is like really what is human about creativity. There's obviously we talk a lot lately about AI and AI's impact on all forms of art. But what you're talking about is really like the alchemy of how different
Mm,
creative wisps come into the body and alchemize in the way that they could only for you. Like
mm,
if I'm listening to something and I just heard that poem that Chelene read to us, and later on I'm eating, I don't know, dinner, and here in this place called Tasha, those things come together in a way that it couldn't anywhere else in the universe, right?
Exactly. No AI bot is going to replicate that. That's not going to happen. And it's also part of it too is the experience of it and the way I will feel in that moment of remembering or in that moment of feeling that desire to go and like jump up and do something. I think we miss out on that in today's world where it's like, how can I just lay down and scroll? Or how can I just jam pack my calendar with things? Or how can I go and fight this cause and burn myself out so that I am a shell? So again, it's that experience of I had this idea and it just like tickled my brain a little bit. And even if I did nothing with it, I still can recall the experience of it coming to me. And again, those kinds of things, like I chase those little bursts and those little feelings because that's what makes you a creative or a writer is this desire to do something more with what you have. And I don't know how else to explain that, but it's just like a tickly feeling or like a whisper. So nice.
That resonates with me so much. I always call it my trail of embers. It's like I'm like walking in my mind. I imagine I'm like walking down the path, which is just my day, and then there's just like these little embers, little sparkles or shimmers, right? And I'm like, ooh, there, that, and that's how I know that something is like meaningful because it like lights me up instantly. So I'm following my little trail of embers.
I like that. I had to write that down. Trail of Embers. Could be a poem title. Could be. It could be.
It was the working title of my memoir a year ago.
Oh,
I don't think it is anymore, but it's in the mix somewhere.
it has risen to the surface now. So who knows what's gonna happen?
Do we get to hear it again?
Yes, yes. I forgot. I have to reread this. So I'm gonna reread. Dear Ghosts, I picked the list. And now that you know each other's choices and you know what I kind of landed on, let's see if the poem sits differently for you. The names like herringbones from the fish's oiled cavity. I run them between my teeth, stroke the scarred light of photographs. Your granulated faces, mimeographed eyes, always left in the dark. I take up scissors, razor blades, the rusted garden loppers, pinking shears. I scissor you to islands, rearrange until my fingerprints peel. Your face is gray. I bind you to my walls. I let you hang. You watch me sleep. Your silence, a blood burst in my mouth. I dream of ink. Wake as a stain against my sheets. Finally, I shred the maps, scatter the portraits, watch you faceless flutter down. 100-year-old snow dusts the ground. This is our only blessing. Bury you in the yard, sing as I fingernail our forgetting into the bone clay.
Was a completely different poem for me this time.
What's different? Yeah.
Yeah, the first time was this like visceral listening. It was still really visceral, but I wasn't listening for meaning or like narrative or anything. This time I was like, oh, that's what the writer is doing, like cutting up old pictures and stuff like that. It was much more of like a warm experience, like a longing or a grief experience. And I stuck with the 100-year-old snow. What's the line? 100-year-old snow dusts the ground.
Yeah.
Because it reminded me of like 100 Years of Solitude, like that Gabriel Garcia Marquez book. How about you?
Yeah, the still went into the cavity. I mean, I find it's more like a striking image hits, and then I'm there, and I'm not hearing the rest of the poem. And the one this time was the eyes left in the dark. It was literally like two pinpricks of the eyes, just then pushed into this dark place, and I kind of went into that place. And then I realized I was missing the rest of the poem, and I came back out. That's what it was for me.
Yeah. It's so interesting because the first time You mentioned falling into the cavity, Jeff. That's exactly what I pictured when I got to that part and I read that. I hit cavity and I'm like, push, there goes Jeff. He's going down into the cavity. So that was interesting. It's almost like you've written yourself into the poem in an interesting way. And I think that is super cool. But this is also why I like to read and share other writers' work and not just my own, because I feel like I know it so intimately that I have a fear that there is no room for this kind of expansive experiencing of the piece. So super fascinating.
Interesting. I was just reading a review of this Booker contender, something about the space of volume. This Norwegian writer who's written a kind of Groundhog Day. It's like volumes and volumes of books have been written about the same day. This bookseller wakes up on the same day every day, this day in November. But instead of being like a Groundhog Day type thing about you got to figure out how to get the day right and be more loving, not at all. It's just an exploration of time and coming around again and again and what gets picked up. And apparently it's just this, everything you're saying is just very weird because it's kind of like, it's got me thinking about this book that I just ordered from the library. So sorry, that was a
Cool.
non sequitur, but
Very interesting. Because time is fascinating, and what we find in the world that repeats itself just in different ways or shows up as that same thing but dressed in a disguise. Like I'm always thinking about that. The world is continually showing us the same things over and over, but maybe in different proximities, right? Sometimes we're really close, it's very overt, we know what's going on. Other times it's across the street. So again, how does that then play into writing and reading and how we immerse ourselves in both of those acts? So love things like that. I feel like my to be read list has now grown. Odd.
sorry, it must be pretty big already.
Oh my gosh.
It is. It is very, very big.
I have the affliction that a lot of readers do, which is I have more books purchased than I could ever read and buying more constantly. But there's something really magical even about a book that I'll never read because it's sitting there on my shelf and it's doing something to me anyway. Like there's a title there, there's this invitation, I could read this book. People talk about it. I have ideas about what's going to be in it. I might never get to it, but I don't know what, like
You already started reading it.
Yeah, exactly. Books are magical.
Yes. They're magical and they hold space. They take up space, but they're always secretly looking at you. Like right in front of me, I've got like rows and rows of like books. Some of these I've not read, but they're just staring at me. And they're like, well, if you want to spare 5 minutes and at least read the first page, like they're just looking at me. And so I think those invitations are powerful. So whether or not you ever do it doesn't matter. It's just there waiting forever. Like literally forever.
Some of the books that I don't end up reading, or maybe I'll snack on and I never get around to them, are books that I know are going to be more difficult. One writer that's like that is James Baldwin for me, because I love him, but like his work can be really difficult, about racism and the plight of our entire last 150 years. And everything I've read by him, I've loved, but it just dragged me through the ringer. So I have all these James Baldwin books I've never read, but the buying of them was somehow symbolic and important to me. I'm like, someday I will get around to reading it.
Yeah.
I'll have enough wherewithal.
The buying of the books, that's process, but also the act of putting them in their home. Where will they live? Will they all be kind of huddled together? I have a Toni Morrison shelf behind me and an image of her. But I think about okay, well, what book is going to go beside what book? Which book gets to sit beside Bluest Eye? And what do I imagine? This is how deep I go with this. What do I imagine to happen on that bookshelf when I'm not here? How are those two books going to be in conversation? What would Pecola in The Bluest Eye be saying to, Sula? What's happening? How can the books write stories? And how do I get to be a part of that? So even if I'm not going to reread those right now, I'm still thinking about the possibility of what will happen with them being alone on the shelf, doing their thing. So how are we ever not reading, when we're thinking in this way? It's I think it's so important. I don't know. It's just, we're all telling the same stories. People get kind of weirded out when I say that, but it's true. We're all writing the same things all the time, like belonging, or writing about identity and pain and grief and love and all those big kind of abstract ideas. So how are we going to come up with new ways to write those same stories. And it is through those collaborations and imagined conversations that I think kind of crack something new open. But again, if you do not value slowing down long enough to even think that that is a possibility, then what are you missing out on? Right. And I think that gives me a lot of energy, where even if I had, a full day and I think, the last thing I want to do is crack open a book or write something or do something creative. I just, maybe this is a meditation where I'm just going to close my eyes and imagine, right? I'm just going to think about these characters that I love so much and imagine them crossing borders and timelines and eras to be able to be in conversation with one another. Actually, a book that comes to mind. Maybe I'll save it because I have another practice. So maybe this is a good time for that. So another book that I have that I would love to read from is, I don't know if either of you have read Patricia Smith's poems. She's got a beautiful book, Blood Dazzler, which is like, it is my absolute favorite. So I'm going to read this poem and then I'm going to read it again. But I might change something in terms of how I deliver this poem to you. And so maybe it is in that change that you start to see the poem differently. It's very short. It's very short. So this is 7 p.m. Thursday, August 25th, 2005. Hurricane Katrina makes landfall in Florida. And this is from Patricia Smith's Blood Dazzler. I see what makes this language, does and taste, soil on my tongue and feel, brick splintering spine and hear them and want it all. So take a second and just kind of notice whatever's coming up for you. Maybe it was the speed at which I read that. Maybe it was the words. Maybe it was where I paused or where I didn't pause. And just think about that. And I'm going to read it again right away, but I'm going to shift something. 7 p.m., Thursday, August 25th, 2005. Hurricane Katrina makes landfall in Florida. I see what this language does and taste soil on my tongue and feel brick splintering spine and hear them and want it all. So we can take a second with that version. Think about whether or not you noticed any shifts in meaning. Maybe different images popped up in the mind. And just kind of sit with that and sit with whatever those vibrations might be. For me, I will say that I always enjoy reading that the second time around.
Oh my God.
When I get to sit with it, because I feel like the first time I'm just delivering. The second time I'm delivering, but I'm a very specific kind of messenger. So I enjoy rereading that the second time.
I don't know if I was picking up your vibe reading it or the poem itself, but it was like really intense. It made me really emotional. Felt like a lot about grief and the kind of heartbroken sacredness of trying to be a witness and just being a feeling human in this very hard world. I don't know, but I had a very strong visceral response to it the second time. And the first time, I didn't even know what I heard. It just went by so fast. I was like, I didn't even know. What was that? It was like a broken brick spine. I got that. I had a couple little images, but it was all splintered. And then this time it was like, whoa. Because you slowed down, right? Obviously,
Yeah, the first reading to me felt like a hurricane. Like it embodied, it wasn't like personal, like it didn't feel like a person talking. It felt like the rhythm of the storm, like in and out, violent, what was that line? Blood breaking brick spine, what
Winter.
splinter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like it felt like that, and then it ends. It was kind of just like a car crash or something, like so like impactful. And then the second time, it felt like a person. It felt like being with a person, like you said, a
Oh,
feeling
yeah.
human being. And also because as you slowed down, I heard the different senses. You're like, I hear, I feel, I want. I don't know if there was another one in there, but it was like sensual. Yeah, so I really felt the person in it, and it was like being invited into a very private world.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you, Chelene, what were you feeling when you read that the second time?
When I read it the second time,
Maybe the first and second. Yeah.
yeah, the first time, again, it's just me thinking about, and it's pretty much exactly what both of you said. I think it's just mind-boggling that you folks were able to experience that and to take that away. So for me, reading it the first time is this quick happening. You don't have time to see or feel or hear anything, but that is the essence of the piece. What is it then to be someone coming back after destruction? And maybe not witnessing it because I wasn't a part of this destruction. I wasn't there. But to see the pieces that aren't there based on what is. So it's this idea of absence and removing certain things and only seeing what is left. So I felt like I got to witness someone's grief or loss, but to see it up close to the point where I can see every crack in the wall versus being across the street and think, oh, something's different, something happened. Now I'm forced to look at it slowly, and there's nowhere for me to go. And I think that's where some of the emotion can come from, knowing that there's nowhere to go in this container of this poem, which is just, again, things like that. We do not notice these things if we don't slow down. So the idea of the second read shows us the power of slowing down and what's possible.
I don't think I've ever actually read a poem like that.
Really?
And not in the way you're describing. It's making me realize I'm excited. I have a lot to learn.
Good.
I mean, of course, I have a poetry. You take it in, but like the way you're talking about it, yeah, it's very inspiring.
I love what you said about seeing what's there by seeing what's not there. I can't remember what you said, but like seeing like
The
you
idea
can
of the
feel-
absence.
Yeah, you can feel
Yeah.
the absence of something, and it certainly on like the second read, the images or the lack of images, almost just kind of like brick spine, just the way those words are put together feels like the chaos of, like you said, what you'd see when you came back. It's almost like how could you form a complete sentence? A complete sentence wouldn't describe the destruction and chaos that you came back to see. So it's like the words are painting the experience.
Yeah. And it's a container. It's that container also of the title. Knowing what the writer is writing about creates almost like this tension bubble where if we remove that, we take away that title or that container, we think, well, what just happened? What is going on here? But we're able to attach it to, again, a real happening that we may not know a lot about or we may not be close to. But in that container, in that tension bubble, it's exactly what I shared about Lawrence Hill's book, Book of Negroes. He creates story in a way that makes you feel like you are a part of it. And that is a skill. And that is incredibly difficult to do as a writer. But as a reader, the writer then has to trust that the reader will read it slowly, will ask questions, will be curious, will tuck something away if it becomes too much. I think that's a really powerful act of trust as well, to know that I'm not in the right space to hold this. Let me put it away. Let me pull it back out. That's also something we get to do as human beings, is make a decision to say, I might not read this in the right way right now. Let me tuck it away.
I think that's really interesting what you're talking about, like trusting the reader. I think for anyone who's written anything, that's hard. Like I have trouble with that because like, I mean, the first instinct is to over explain something or give too much like exposition or whatever. And then just like not knowing, how do you trust a reader that you don't know? Like, you know what I mean? I guess it's just like an act of confidence. This is what I'm offering to the world and I'm trusting you to, it's for you or it's not.
Yeah. How do you trust anyone? What happens when someone is in your world? What needs to happen? What conditions need to be right for you to trust someone? And I think the act of writing in general is trust because you're writing all of these things down and then you're putting them in book form and then you're ushering them out into the world and you kind of almost turn your back on it for a bit. You're like, I hope this does what I need it to do. So, how you trust someone is you say to them, I'm going to give you this. This is only one piece of the puzzle. It's not going to unlock anything, but you have to come to the table with another piece in order for the lock to open. And I truly believe that that's what we do as readers. When you pick up a book, it's not going to be explained to you what needs to happen, but you have to come in and kind of put your little puzzle piece down. And that's going to look different for everyone, I think. So there's no template to that, but writers, I think, always have to be thinking about this idea of trust because nobody wants to read something that's this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened. Goodbye. There's something else that needs to occur. And I think that is on the part of the writer to say, I'm going to withhold this. I'm going to keep this. I want the reader to come in with their piece so that they can connect to this story. So again, when I think about Jeff falling down the cavity, not to keep bringing that up, but there's just something about that. You came with that piece. And if you didn't come with that piece, Jeff, then you would not have experienced that poem in the same way, right? So that was your unique piece to fall down the cavity. Yeah. And you push people away, I think, when you write in this way. When you say, you know what, I'm not going to tie this up in a bow. Who am I pushing out? I think that's something I tend to think about early. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. I know there's a group of people who are going to be like, I don't want to read this. And I'm like, that's cool because that's not for you. So I'm going to focus on this line here and just trust that the right people at the right time will know when to put their puzzle piece down because it is that experience that is so vibrant and illuminating that it is worth losing the other group over here who, may never know what that puzzle piece is. So I try to remember that because, does it mean that you're speaking to a smaller group? Maybe, but that doesn't mean that the conversation that comes from that is at a lower volume. It might be even louder with this 100 people than this 100,000 people over here.
Yeah. Well, who do you want to spend time with as a reader too? Mm-hmm. Do you want to spend time with somebody who has a potted idea of how the reality is?
Or one who values your intelligence.
Values your intelligence, but also has enough humility to stay with the open question around something. I feel very literally that claustrophobia when I'm with a writer. I can't read it. If there's too many certainties or too much, I don't know, a kind of preachiness or a kind of
this is how it is.
This is how it is. Closure. I'm like, get me out of here. I feel it as like a consent issue.
Yeah.
Like it's like I feel like they're trying to like impose this thing on me, and I feel very outraged.
Yeah. Consent issue. I really like that because reading is so intimate. It is an intimate act, and we're talking about like a dance. You're talking about joining puzzle pieces together and stuff. It's like if I'm inviting you into my nervous system for however long it takes me to read this book, it can't just be you talking the whole time.
Yes, the reader needs to be okay, entering this place of not knowing. If you get to the end of the book and you're like, I don't know this, we'll take that not knowing and maybe do something with it. But I think it's really difficult to resist that desire to wrap it up neatly because that's what we're taught as writers. You gotta please your reader. No. I'm not here to please readers. This is my experience. I'm here to gift them something. And if they want to gift themselves something in return, they need to get that puzzle piece ready and place it down.
Man, the practice of reading. I did not know we were going to be going here so fully. And so this is awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Before we go to all our corners where we can all read some poetry for the rest of the day.
Slowly.
Tell us how listeners can interact more with your work. They can read your books, but they can also work with you as you're a talented mentor of writers.
Yeah, so thank you. Yes, you can definitely read my books. I have 5 books. They are all very different. They are all in very different genres. I've got poetry, memoir, narrative nonfiction, fiction, everything you can imagine because I am a layered human being with very different ideas for every single book project. So you can read my books. You can go to CheleneKnight.com, or if you're interested in my studio and the work that I do with writers and other creatives, you can go to BreathingSpaceCreative.com.
I am a breathingspacecreative.com alum, and we'll be
Ooh,
returning.
yes, you are.
I'm very interested.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll start.
Do you have
with
any
your poetry.
programs coming up, or are you just working one-on-one with people these days? or-
Yeah, the one-on-one stuff is everything for me. Again, what have I learned about myself? I love the intimacy of the one-on-one, but I'm also launching something new and different in the summer. It's called
Ooh.
Launch Your Book with Love, which essentially is all about if you've got a book and it's on the horizon, it's coming out, how do you plan almost an ecosystem around it where you're pushing it out into the world in your unique way and kind of turning down the volume on what everyone else is suggesting that you do. So it's like this intentional launch building thing.
Chelene helped me get my first couple stories published. Like I had a creative nonfiction piece and a couple short fiction and stuff like that. Really, it was that piece of advice of like, send the signals out to the places that you want them to. Like, don't worry about like, oh, I need to get published in this literary magazine or get read by this people. She was like, just, spend the time being like, who do I want to speak to? Who do I want to draw near to myself? And that was it was just such a breath of fresh air. And I was like, I got my first pieces published within like 6 months.
Hey, there you go. Beautiful thing.
Glowing reviews. Thank you so much, Chelene. You're amazing.
Thank you, friends. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thank
Great
you.
to meet you, Chelene.
Great to meet you too.
Welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod, where every week we dive into a different practice, a different perspective on life, and you try it out with us. Join us on Substack at mindbodpod.com to watch this episode as a video podcast. And if you want to support our crazy adventures and get fun perks and exclusives along the way, join us as a paid subscriber. Now, onto this week's adventure.